So this is basically a recycled talk from the Lndb conference, describing the Lndb product. Nothing real, under the hood technical about it. It was intended just to describe what it is, what it does, and what it could do for them or their customers. So, basically the Lndb as a product is designed to connect to LargNet, get data out of LargNet's cache as it arrives, and send it to an SQL database automatically. Obviously, you have to have LargNet running. It could be running from the toolbar, or it could be running as a service. Either way, it has to be running. And you have to have scheduled data collection going on. Otherwise, there's nothing coming into the cache. Components of Lndb. Basically, I'll show you what it looks like in the Start menu. So you've got the Lndb Manager, the Lndb Service Manager, DB Export, DB Import, and a manual and quick reports. I'll try to go over most of those, but I'm not going to spend much time on quick reports or DB Export or DB Import. Janet wants to keep this short, so that's what I'm going to try to do. The trickiest part is getting LargNet and the SQL server all connected through Lndb. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. I cheated and I copied that same group to a folder just in case I need it. Okay, the Lndb Manager, I'll fire that up. It's similar. Oh. It's a really big presentation for that thing. But it brought up the manager, and it's basically telling me, hey, the service isn't installed, nothing's running. So it brought up the Lndb Engine Service Manager kind of in the background, because it knows I can't do anything until I get that service started. So I'm going to install the service. Now here, there's kind of a caveat. If you're going to be dealing with Microsoft SQL Server, and if you're going to be using Windows authentication only, if you have that SQL Server set up for Windows authentication only, then you'd have to set this up under some user's account. Okay. If you've enabled SQL authentication and Windows authentication, then you can probably just go with the local system account. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, but Windows authentication, I must.
Well, you're basically saying I'm going to use the same credentials I use when I log into Windows to log into the SQL server. We'll install it under local system account. Okay, so it got installed, so the service is installed. Click the Start button. Okay, it says it's running and started. Notice at the bottom, I'm going to close the Lndb Engine Service Manager now, but notice at the bottom, we now have a green. It's kind of hard to see from back there. We've got indicators on the bottom that tell us whether we're connected to the LargNet server and the SQL server. It says we're connected to the SQL server, but we're not connected to a LargNet because we don't have LargNet running yet. Maybe launch LargNet. I do not have it running as a service. I'm just going to run it from the toolbar. This is a lot bigger display mode than what I was working with upstairs, but it'll all work. Okay, so I'm going to attach to the Lndb server on localhost. Okay, so we've got connected to Lndb, connected to the SQL server. It tells us the engine's running. These, it's hard to see from back there, but these are actually shortcuts down here too. I mean, if I double click any of them, it'll bring up the prompt to log me into the Lndb server or log me into the, boy, it's blinking like crazy. Surprised that's not bringing this up. That should be bringing up this interface. Which SQL server you want to log into. Right now I just have it hooked up to SQL Compact. I'm going to get into the different flavors of SQL that Lndb supports. Okay. I'll just do that now. You see we support 3 different SQL servers. SQL Server, it's a Microsoft product, SQL Server Compact. It actually gets installed when you install an Lndb. It's a single file database. It's not distributable. You can't connect to it remotely from other computers on the network. But you could share that file pretty easily with somebody if you wanted to. You just have to copy it off your PC and give it to them. SQL Server refers to Microsoft's SQL Server. They've got various flavors: Enterprise, Standard, Express. I have Express installed on this computer. And then you have MySQL, which they've got an enterprise version of that, but they've also got a free community edition that you can download and use freely. And the differences between some of these, look at, well, here's where we haven't released Lndb or Lndb for what, since 2010, I think. So we don't update manuals if we're not releasing new software, right? Well, the manual basically says for Microsoft SQL, we support 2005 Express and 2008 Express. That's what the manual says. Well, I've tested it against 2012 and 2014, various flavors, Standard, Express, and it seems to work with them just fine too. So even though it's not in the manual, if the customer asks, does it work with 2012 and 2014 Microsoft SQL Server, you can tell them yes. And for MySQL, I've tested it. Let's see, the manual says it's compatible with 5.0 and 5.1, but I've tested it with various ones up to 5.6 and it seems to work just fine too. The other difference between, well, another difference between the Microsoft SQL Server and MySQL Server, if we're talking to a Microsoft SQL Server, we're going to do it directly from Lndb straight to the SQL Server. But for MySQL, you have to install what's called an ODBC connector. It's kind of a pipe between Lndb and the MySQL server. I'll show you the differences in these select database forms so that you can kind of see the difference.
Which one is required for sub-second timestamps?
I think we've got sub-second figured out. Well, in the released one, we can't do sub-second on
MySQL.
MySQL.
And then we've got it working now. The next version
With
will
the
support sub-second and either or all three.
So if you've got a newer MySQL and an LNDB, a fresh one, a beta, then you should be able to get sub-second. And I tried it against the, well, I think I talked to you about it. I tried it against the station at back and worked just fine. We got sub-second data. I checked the bin. So,
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember which type it was though. But any of them will work now. Huh?
any of it, yes, as far as I know.
You wouldn't want compact for your stuff.
No.
The database is
Too much data.
small. Yeah.
Okay, but what's the limit on compact? It's a file size.
You remember, Mark, is it 4 gigabytes? I think it's 4 gigs.
You can fill that up pretty quick with your stuff. Okay. So if I was going to go with compact, really simple interface, you just point to the file. Okay. If I want to go and connect to the Microsoft SQL server, the interface is a little bit different. You have to pick a data source. This is the Latitude computer that I have SQL Express on. And you can pick Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. I've got this SQL Server set up to use either. You have to configure it and say whether you want to use one or the other, or both. So I'll just do Windows authentication. And if that works, or notice how you'd have to supply a login ID and password if you did SQL Server authentication. Either way, if you've got your credentials set up, when you click on this database drop-down list, it should list various databases available in whatever database you're hooked up to. Okay. Now I made a database, just an empty database, in Microsoft SQL Express called Lndb. There's nothing in it yet. Okay. And I might as well show that. I've got a front end to it. Okay, let's try this. Well, this was working upstairs. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time trying to get in there just to show you that there's nothing in that database. Suffice it to say that LNDB database, I just initialized the database in Microsoft SQL Express. The reason I do that is because if you just say, okay, connect to the default database in Microsoft SQL Express, it's going to, I mean, there are already some tables in the default one. As soon as you install it, there are some tables in there. If you connect to that, you're going to end up with all of your LNDB tables interleaved with the tables that already exist. Okay, it's a mess. I don't like doing that. That's why I like starting a new database instance and then connecting LNDB to it. So connect LNDB to it. And from here, in log, I basically have this hooked up to one single data logger sitting up on my desk upstairs. I've got scheduled data collection going on once every 5 seconds. Things I'm connected to LoggerNet, it can see, well, this is what's available in the cache. If you just, I mean, by simply checking off the tables that you want, you're saying, this is what I want you to grab out of the cache and put into the database, okay? By default, if you click on the data logger in the tree, it's not going to check public and status because it doesn't make much sense. They're one record tables, right? But as soon as you apply it, I'm going to jump over to the status tab. it's already caught up. I mean, there's 5-second, 1-minute data since yesterday in there, and it's already caught up. Refresh. Really? I'm wondering why I can't see the tables.
I think you're showing an error down there. Let's look at the status tab.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm getting a weird refresh here that's messing with me. I can't bring stuff up from the shortcuts at the bottom.
See the error on the status messages tab too.
Oh, yeah, we can go there. It's like it can't get logged in. Okay, let me try SQL authentication, see if we can get it.
Hey Glenn, while you're working on that, Kim, what would be the penalties of ditching our binary cache and just completely wholesale going over to an SQL backend?
There we go. Now it's
Probably
going.
just the complexity of, unless we install the SQL backend, we'd have to find an embedded one for by default, I think.
Okay.
Something like compact, or we probably want to find something a little more capable. Compact at 5 API is a little frail, I think, for lots of data.
Okay, the Windows authentication wasn't working for me, but the SQL authentication did. And we've got data going into it now. So on the data review tab, you can see I've got my 5-second data, my 1-minute data that I selected over here. That's what I wanted. Oh, come on. That's what I wanted from my cache to go into the SQL server. There's a couple other tables. Got a station table. That's got my one station. If I had more stations, there'd be more listed here. And then you have a table that has the tables that I'm writing to the SQL server. And then there's a column table. Those are all meta tables. You don't need to do anything with them. Don't mess with them. Just let Lndb manage them. They're related to each other via these column IDs and linked to each other. Should never have to mess with them. It's just FYI metatables.
So is that like metadata for this information or not? Is that something else?
Yeah, I mean, we called it metatable because it is kind of metadata for what we're doing here, but no, I mean, it's not for doing stuff like what's the GPS location of your station, take a photo, put it in, it's not that kind of metadata about the station. Okay. Okay. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to go to a different database. Like I said, I've got MySQL on here also. I wanted to show you the difference between the select database interfaces. If I say MySQL, now it says data source. I have to pick an Lndb or a MySQL connector. Now that's set up. If I click on this administer ODBC data sources button, that just brings up the ODBC interface that comes with Windows. You normally get to this through the control panel. We put a button on there to make it convenient to bring it up from here.
Sorry, what's ODBC stand for?
ODBC, I knew somebody was going to ask, Open Database Connectivity. But it basically sits here in the System DSN tab, and it's a pipe, an ODBC pipe between Lndb and MySQL server. It is installed as a separate component though, besides, or apart from MySQL. Okay, so pick that. We are doing SQL server authentication with this. I did initialize an Lndb database, a new database in MySQL also. Okay, if I click OK, we're basically attaching to a totally different SQL database. We just switched from Microsoft's SQL to MySQL. So Lndb is thinking, okay, well, this is fresh, this is new, so I have to enable what I want to for this database. Okay, I'm going to enable the 5-second and 1-minute tables from my logger. Apply that. If I go to status, it's bringing in records, and it's all caught up. I do a refresh, there are my tables. Okay. Okay, so what else can we do from these screens? You can see we've got select and deselect buttons on the setup tab for selecting or deselecting all. On the status, there's not much here besides what are we doing? What's the status? Data review, you got a refresh, a delete. If you wanted to really delete one of your tables, you could delete it out of the database. An archive button, that would basically archive that table and go ahead.
Delete doesn't delete it from the database that took it, right? It's
No.
just deleting it from Lndb, doesn't get it in.
No. This is an interface to the SQL database.
So it deletes that whole table from the SQL or whatever.
Database. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
You should hide that.
Well, it probably would give you a confirmation. I mean, I'm sure we were smart enough to say, are you sure you want to do that?
Let's see. Click
Yeah,
on it.
try it.
Okay, I can do that.
All right, great.
I think we put that in there by user request. People, they're a table they're not using anymore, and it's just sitting out in the database. And we said, oh, use your other tools, but it was so commonly asked for that
They wanted to be,
put it in.
yeah. If they want to get rid of it, you want to make it easy for them to do it, but not too easy.
Yeah.
A single click wouldn't have been a good idea, probably. Okay, significant events. The only significant ones we've got so far are creation of the tables that I just initialized. But, I don't know, others are, as the table definitions change, and that's kind of what we're going to get into here soon. The table definitions change in the data logger, and LoggerNet's still collecting data. Lndb's going to see that and has to deal with it somehow. The status messages tab, that's just kind of everything. Every time a write happens to the database tables, every time anything happens, you're going to see something show up in here. Okay, let's
That's
go.
not an indefinite memory, is it? It gets a fill and then overwrites stuff.
You talking about what we're seeing
That
here?
status, yeah.
Yeah, I believe there's a logs folder. Candle side, Lndb,
That's what that is.
Whoop. Come on, let me in. Yeah.
Right.
So those state logs are what we're seeing there. And yeah, there's a limit.
Just like the other log files.
I think they're settable up here in options. And I was going here anyway. Maybe they're not settable.
Doesn't it also write to the transaction log? It's a service transaction?
As far as it being a client, you're probably going to see some things show up in LoggerNet server log. You know, it's querying data out of the cache, so. Yeah. Is there not a way to set the number of log files? You're just hard-coded at what? Remember? Okay.
5, 10,
Okay.
I don't know.
I was thinking 10 in the back of my head for some reason. Okay, but I was headed here anyway. This options, you get to it through tools, options. What do you want Lndb to do if table definitions change? You got 3 options. Stop storing data, archive the database table, and basically continue with a new table, or modify the database table if it can, and it can't modify the database table and must do an archive, go ahead and do an archive. Now, what is going to cause it? I mean, I usually go with this latter option. Modify the table if you can, archive it if you have to, okay? That way, like if a new field shows up in the data loggers table, we'll be able to insert that new field into the existing SQL table. And we'll just backfill the column with nulls, okay? And then we'll give good data for that new field from the logger. If a field disappears from the logger, we'll just start filling that with nulls in the database, okay? So this is the option I would think most people would go with. Now what would make it have to archive? Basically, if any column, you know, a column in the data logger, and in the LoggerNet cache, and in the SQL database, if its units change, or if its process changes, like totalize, sample, average, the table basically has to get archived because we don't have the ability basically to change the data type of a column in the database, right? That's one thing. And if its units do change, our meta table that indicates units, I guess yeah. Even if we had the ability to change the units indicated in the meta table, which one is it? There we go. You know, the actual physical number, you don't want to keep storing something that switched from degree C to degrees Fahrenheit. You know, you got to archive that table and start a new one. Otherwise, you've got mixed data units, right? So let's try to make a discrepancy here. See what happens. Okay, I'll just retrieve this program. What? I have connectivity issues? Maybe we didn't get the network connection worked out as good as we thought. There we go. It's probably going to hiccup again now. Yep. It's acting like somebody else's LoggerNet is attaching to my logger on my desk, but that shouldn't be the case. I'm going to try something anyway. Okay, let's change this to something different. we get the same hiccups. No? Got it that time. I think there must be another logger net hitting my data logger on my desk. Come on. Okay, so let's change. Let's open the right file first. Let's comment out a field in that table and maybe add a new one. Let's do, what the heck, minimum. Yeah, let's pick that. Okay, so we basically added a field and removed a field from that table, right? Save that. I'm going to send it to the logger. Okay, we just saw table definitions got updated. We got scheduled data collection going on. Let's see if we got any significant events. There we go. There's one. So detected missing database columns. It added FF min column. Now, one of the columns went away too, so I would have expected. Okay, so this is from the, yeah.
This backwards. Go.
Yeah, new data's at the top, remember?
Yeah, that's okay. I got my new temp F here. What the heck did I comment out?
Scratch.
Oh, okay.
Temple in there.
That was kind of a silly one. I should have got it a little bit different one. Okay, so scratch is empty. This is being filled with nulls, and our new one is catching new values and backfilling nulls. Okay.
So if you swapped the order in your program of scratch and temp in one of the temps, would
Just
it?
move them around and
Yeah, if you just moved them around, what would
shouldn't.
this do? Would it keep it the same, or?
It should. I mean, I don't think this, the column order in the database, I don't think is going to change just because you changed. I think it just goes on field names, doesn't it?
Mine tried that.
Mark,
I
Mark.
would think it would keep
I
going.
think it's just
but-
going with field names.
Yeah,
I mean, as long as the field names are the same, units are the same, the process is the same, I think you're good. And you didn't change any of that by
remove an
moving
ad or something like that. Let's see.
So,
Okay.
so the LNDB is telling the database how many fields, right? And you made a
Yes.
comment earlier on that before you set this up, you have to go into SQL and delete or change the tables, or else you get intertwined records or something.
basically
What
just
were you
create-
talking about there?
I'll do a quick thing here and show you.
See, I was thinking from that you had to go in here and tell it how many data fields it should expect, but it looks like LNDB goes in and sets that up for us.
That's all automatic.
Okay.
He was saying, Ryan, that the default tables that are built into those
Okay,
databases have other information already in them, so if you don't create a fresh database, you'll get a mixture of whatever they had already as default in that database, plus what LNDB is mixing.
see this is kind of a front end to MySQL that I like. This is a list of databases basically over here on the left. MySQL is one that you end up getting as soon as you install the thing. That's just a database that MySQL creates and maintains. it happens to be the default database. So imagine this Lndb schema all intertwined with that.
So it's
Kind of
not
be a mess.
records and columns,
Yeah.
it's at the table level. It's just database
Okay.
creates its own tables, and your tables will be in there with amongst
And
those.
all I was
Okay.
suggesting to do was to basically
Just clean out those other tables. in the
create
database.
new database, just like that.
Okay.
I could call it XYZ.
It's like a subdirectory, create your own
You do have
subdirectory, put your files in there. instead of
So
making
I
it
basically
just
just created a blank, brand new XYZ directory, or
Okay.
XYZ database, right? Brand new blank. If I go back over to LNDB, I should be able to attach to that. XYZ. And if I say go ahead, it should attach to it. This is like me starting all over again, okay, with a new database. I'm telling LNDB, here's a new database, populate all that stuff in it. Boom. Brand new database instance. And if I go back over here, I can do a refresh. There we go. See? It just keeps all those LNDB tables out of whatever the default database is in whichever database you do.
Glenn, it looks like it's a one-to-one relationship.
We're over
One LNDB to one database at any given time, right?
At any given time, yes. And I think we've had some requests to be able to attach it to multiple logger nets, multiple databases.
So many-to-many kind of thing.
Yeah. But, I mean, you think about LoggerNet's cache, if you, for some reason, wanted to be populating both the Microsoft SQL and the MySQL database, I suppose if you remember to switch, once a week between the two, the cache is probably not wrapping around in that amount of time, at least not in a weather station type data.
Sure, I understand what you're saying.
Your data,
You do it manually, or maybe it's scriptable taskmaster, I don't know.
it's not really scriptable, but
One LoggerNet into multiple databases is a difficult problem because you get that LNDB gets that data. And if it's able to store it in this database, it goes ahead and does so. But if it can't store it in this database, then it has to keep track of which data has been stored in which database, and it kind of escalates the amount of information it has to keep in state. Plus, there's lots of ways of replicating data from database to database that databases provide that may be more efficient than having LNDB do it, like multiple LoggerNets into a database. That makes more sense than trying to go and trying to populate multiple databases. But probably will do that, I think.
and even then, you'd end up showing a huge variety of status messages. And, I can just imagine you'd have to start specifying which LoggerNet server is having the problem, which SQL server is having the problem. It could get messy.
So can you have two stations that LoggerNet's doing scheduled collection from, and then this LNDB is pulling data from both of those stations and putting it into one database here?
Anything that's flowing into LoggerNet's cache.
Okay, so
is
anything in the
available to
cache
LNDB.
is-
Yeah. I mean, you could have a gigantic network and all kinds of data flowing into the cache. It's all available to LNDB, and it can all go over to the SQL server. And
Is that how most customers using LNDB right now are using it? It's these ones that have a big network or something? Or?
There's a huge variety. I mean, working with some guys from Huxaflux, they're just doing tests, like calibration tests on their Heatflux plates. And they want it in a database, even though they step up to this lab once or twice a week and do a quick test or whatever. They want it in a database. So there's a huge variety.
So this is all about putting stuff into the database. Now, to get it out, you suggest that you go through the dashboard that the individual database has. I saw the export feature under the tools up there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was.
That's where I wasn't going to spend. I'm not
Yeah, I
going
know.
to. I'm not going to spend much time on these, but you need to know that they're there and why we put them there. We've got DB import and we've got DB export. Okay. Import. The caveat on that is says file can be imported if all the data file fields, so all the data file fields, have a corresponding database table column. Okay, so it's every field defined in that file has got to have a corresponding database column. Okay, that means there are going to be extra database columns, but if you've got a field defined in that data file doesn't exist in the table that you're trying to import it into, you can't import the file at all, at least not currently. We're thinking about maybe ways of getting around some of this stuff in the future. Okay?
We have done some work there.
Yeah, but right now, if there's a field in the data file that does not exist in the table that you're trying to get the data into, you can't import it. Now, imagine, great, I've been collecting data from my Logan station, going into the cache. Lndb's been putting it into the SQL database. I've also got this huge file that goes well beyond what my cache does in Loggernet. Okay, I want to get that into the database. It imports easily because the fields match between the table in the database and the table in the file. And yes, there's data in that file that already exists in the database. That doesn't matter. Okay, you point to the file, you say import it. Basically, as the import utility is cranking through, if it sees a date and a record number that's the same in the table, it's a key violation and nothing happens. It basically leaves the data that's already in the database table alone. Right?
That's database specific. One of them does that. The other database just overrides. Like MySQL, I can't remember which does which. One of them takes the new record and just overrides. Doesn't say anything. The other one fails and doesn't insert.
But in either case,
Yeah,
it's called a key violation.
Yeah.
It's just the behavior of the database, the way it acts. I didn't realize one of them actually overwrote.
Either way, you won't get duplicate timestamps.
Right. As long as you're doing the table-based data loggers. It gets trickier with array-based data loggers, but
And I'm not going to spend much time on this other than just, that's the interface for the import. If you point to a file, you point to a table, you're either going to be allowed to do it or you don't. Okay?
and it'll
And
show
it'll
you.
tell you right here.
Yeah, it'll show you the columns and how they line up. And
Yeah, it'll tell you. I mean, if I pointed to, I know I'm collecting that data here, 5-second data, and I point to that 5-second table, that's some of the information. I mean, I changed it. I changed the file, or I changed the program, excuse me.
This seems pretty applicable to the Micronet group, right? Because you're collecting so much data manually on a card. You bring it back to your office, and multiple people can come and merge their data into a single place.
I would imagine the kind of tools used for that analysis, would allow you to attach to an SQL database as a source. I don't know what kind of statistical tools you guys might use, but most of them can attach to an SQL database, most statistical tools, and it's going to be a lot faster doing an SQL query than accessing a flat text file with all this data. Okay, the other one's export. Same thing. You basically connect to some database.
data source.
I
If you're doing
forgot the ODBC drive, or the ODBC. That's fine. Okay, a little bit more complex database or interface. You select the table you're interested in. You can select the columns that you want. You take all of them basically. Point to an output file. That's fine. Pick a file header type. There is an option to check for missing timestamps, record numbers, if you want to. Both.
That file format has to match what you have it.
No, think about it. This is all coming out of an SQL database. Now,
Right.
we're basically saying, give me the data out of an SQL table, and I want to put it in this file. You can pick probably any of these you wanted to.
So if it's binary in the SQL, then
Yeah.
this will do the conversion.
It'll do it. It'll put whatever header or whatever format you want. Yep. Yep.
This is creating a new file.
Right.
Interval. Table interval. Oh, I gotta specify what it is so that it knows what to check.
And then you can specify a date.
Yep, you can specify
Range.
date range. Okay, so pretty straightforward. The other thing that I'm even going to mention, and then we're going to cut this off, is we do include this quick reports utility. In my experience, I don't know about anybody else's, but I don't think this is getting much mileage amongst customers for some reason. You basically point to one of the SQL tables, pick, some info, pick a begin and end date and time, click OK, and it's basically leveraging RTMC. This is a lot like our visual weather reports. It's leveraging RTMC to show you a report. You can save that, you can open it up later, you can, I think, can you run these like bash reports too? No? Okay. But yeah, I mean, you can save this report for later, bring it up, print it, whatever you want to do. I'm not seeing much mileage on it with customers.
Well, it's worth mentioning RTMC Pro uses, database data directly, and it's the much more capable tool, and so I think people wanting to do reports and displays go migrate to that instead of this guy.
And I think you can, if you do start here, you can import that into RTMC Pro also if you want to do some custom modifications.
And View will read data directly out of the database as well. So those are the tools we've got.
Yeah.
I think RTMC Pro is one of the common uses of Lndb because it gets you past the data that's in the cache. The cache goes away because the column changed, but the database, as you can see, you can keep going.
So questions?
So you do a lot of support, right? So do you feel like the use of Lndb is increasing, that sales are increasing, or is it sort of kind of a rare thing?
No, I think based on, I don't look at sales very often, I leave that up to Dana to monkey with.
Just kind of get a feel
I
of it,
get
getting
a
more and
feel,
more
yeah.
support calls.
I'm getting more and more calls, sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think too many people are getting stuck with setting this up, okay? Occasionally, like if table definitions change and they haven't told it to try to automatically archive or something, they'll say, hey, I don't have any data coming in the database, why? Well, you probably set to stop storing data when table definitions change or something like that, They're simple questions. I think the hardest thing for somebody to do, really, and it's not part of this topic, the hardest thing to do is set up the SQL server itself. MySQL or Microsoft SQL. There's quite a layered
The user
Interface.
administration on that stuff is fairly complicated.
Do you get a sense of have a sense of more people are using SQL Compact versus MySQL? Are you getting any requests for Postgres?
You know, if I was to go with when I'm getting through support calls, I think a lot of people are going with Microsoft rather than MySQL for whatever reason.
It's a better database for this. I think.
Is what?
I think it's a better database for this. MySQL, is commonly used as on the back end for web stuff where you do lots of small queries. When it comes to just pulling large chunks of data out, SQL Server is better at it than MySQL is.
Right.
And I'm seeing standard and enterprise.
Yeah.
Some Express, the free one, but a lot of people are actually forking out the money for standard and for enterprise.
Right. What's the basic difference between standard and enterprise? Just the size, or which one's?
Enterprise has got more tools, doesn't it, Mark, compared to standard? More tools. So, I mean, it's the same sort of database under the hood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not really any more functionality from one to the other, but there are more tools involved with enterprise, I think.
Express has, distinct limitations built in. I don't think the other two do the least impact ones.
Now, Vista Data Vision seems to kind of simplify the database backend installation. Is there
Yeah.
something we can learn from that?
I think it's doable.
Yeah, and
The
they,
common man installation, I guess, is really what it
Yeah,
is, right?
You wonder if that's the way to go, or if we should be looking at, like a hosted database or something. Just to completely remove them from the administration part,
Right.
So,
they've, since they're doing that database setup in the background, they're also doing their darndest to keep your fingers out of it. They set up the admin username and password, and they don't want to tell you what it is. Any questions?
Yeah, so say we have a Micromet customer, for example. We're using the table file 64 option, where we have a daily, a daily file is written for the high frequency data. So would you, and say they wanted to put this all into a database here, and so they collect a card from the field and bring it in. So would they initially just would they first need to connect to the logger once in the lab and just get the table set up in this, and then after that they could start bringing in the cards and do an import? Or is there a way to just from the very beginning just have a .dat file that then you're importing and creating a new table in the database? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to. I mean, you're pretty much dead on when you said you need to connect. At least right now, you need to connect up to the data logger once with LoggerNet and get that table initialized over on the SQL server. But once it's initialized, yeah, you can bring your cards in and do import. But we don't have an automated way of, like dropping that file into a folder and having it automatically import.
that's the case with the current shipping one. With the current beta, I think Mark's got it, so you can start with a data file and manually import that without having to either connect to the data logger or to I think Brian was just suggesting this. You can use a different data logger on your desk, put that same program in it and kind of dummy it up, with the shipping one, tell LoggerNet that's it, and then you can start importing data. So with the new version, you won't have to do either of those two things. It will let you import data directly from file and create a table in the database, and so they would just bring the cards in.
Yeah.
So if you have, it's run for a month, so you have 30 of these files, you have to individually do each one, or does it?
Currently, it's a manual file by file. We've had requests for automating the import, but we just haven't figured out exactly how that would work. And scanning files, looking at the directory, we haven't done it. I mean, we've had a few people ask about it, but we haven't really seen we just haven't pressed through to figure out what to do with that yet.
Or even maybe multiple select. You go to the directory and you select it,
Yeah.
shift, select the last file in the directory.
You just have to have a way of knowing which table in the database that's supposed to go to and stuff like that. You have to have some file name, either have to scan the headers and then try to go find stuff in the database somewhere that matches. I mean, there's some complications there that we just haven't, it isn't doable, we just haven't done it, I think.
Somehow,
It's like
$300
piece of software.
something like trying to link a table to some folder and then be able to drop files into that.
Yeah,
folder
something
and
like that. I mean,
automatically
it's, like I say, it's not, that we can't be solved, it's solvable. We're kind of hoping that your group and Ed has been playing with this, you guys help us figure out how that should work, because I think your groups would be the ones really wanting to do that kind of thing, in particular. I mean, they're the ones that have.
Right on the station out back, we were just, and I think Glenn was doing the same thing, I was just doing short interval collections. As long as I had like a 5-minute scheduled collection, it was able to grab time series data and move it through the cache and move it into the database just fine. So in that case, I wasn't going out and getting a card and importing.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking for the case where it's a remote site and they don't have that.
Yeah, but I
ability,
mean,
and if
there's
they do
probably
want
other
to
ways
still
to
keep
get that file into a database without using Lndb, because you just have a .dat. It has nothing to do with Loggernet at that point. You download it data as just any other file, right? So it's probably other ways to move it into a database rather than going through Lndb to do it.
There are other
Makes it
ways,
easy.
but Lndb would be convenient, I think, compared to some of those other ways that I can think of in the back of my head.
Yeah, I think that's the key. You want a convenient way to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I can totally see, I'll pick on the USGS, for example, but I can totally see a group that might collect their data through a remote communications means that, is susceptible to interruptions and holes and things like that. But they go to the state site every month and they download the data or they collect a card, just, those technicians be able to come back to an office.
Yeah.
And like you said, throw it in a folder on a server and say, oh, this was site 1, site 2, site 3. They just throw their files in there, and then there's a process that sucks it in. That'd be pretty neat.
Even if they're, maybe their cache, got a whole bunch of holes in it, and the data has been going into the database, but it's got a bunch of holes in it. If they were able to go out there to the field and collect the stuff, the whole kit and
Plug the
caboodle,
holes.
and go back in and hit the import utility, they can fill all those holes.
Yep, exactly.
Any other questions? Okay. Well,
Thanks.
yeah. By all means, go back to your desk, fire up Lndb.
You still manually have to take the data off the card, use Lndb.
Sure.